and welcome to Dipping It Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I am very, very fortunate this lovely Monday afternoon to be sitting down with the fabulous Sharon Livermore, MBE. I just have to add that on at the end as well there. Got to be done. Sharon is the founder of Domestic Abuse Education, but she's also a lot more than that. So I will hand over to Sharon to explain a bit more about what she does. And I usually go on to say, and why she does it. So good afternoon, Sharon.
Good afternoon. It is absolutely fantastic to be here with you. So thank you so much for the opportunity. So as you said, yes, I am Sharon Livermore, founder of Domestic Abuse Education, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more. But first of all, I am a survivor of domestic abuse, as you know, having nearly lost my life in 2015 at the hands of my then husband. I think at that point in my life, it gave me a different purpose, obviously, to kind of focus where my life was going and what I wanted to do, which took time. But it's actually 10 years this year that I'll be celebrating. I don't really know what to call it on the day that I nearly lost my life, but there will be a celebration on that day this year. As I say, I don't know what you say, what you call it, but there'll be cake and I'm sure lots of Prosecco bottles popping on that day.
I love that. And you should celebrate, quite right. Yeah, you'll have to come up with a name.
Celebration of life.
Yeah, 100%. Oh my God. And that's what's so incredible, I think, when, sometimes in life we think we know what we're doing and where we're going and what we want to do. And then all of a sudden things kind of develop and the path changes, and what you're doing and how many people and how many organizations you've helped in the last 10 years, but will continue to help, is phenomenal. And I think because you're such an easy person to talk to, you're so approachable.
Thank you.
And your lived experience, it's all so important. And the fact that we'll go on to the whole business around domestic abuse education, like you're saying, everything you're doing there. But would you be happy to talk a bit more about your lived experience? I know you sort of touched on it then around it sort of 10 years ago.
Yeah, of course. So I met my perpetrator when I was at work. I was on a sales course, and he was the man in the room that was, very, very confident and outgoing and friendly. And for me, I guess they're the traits that I found attractive. So as you do as adults, we started a relationship. And looking back now, at the start, it was very much the love bombing, which for those of you that don't know what the love bombing is, it's the compliments all the time. You're amazing, you're beautiful, you're funny. I just felt $1 million. I could not fault any of it. There was presents, there was weekends away. And at that point, I truly, truly believed that I'd met my happy ever after. Yeah. And so, as you do, you want to believe it, right? Because we're human and we want to believe that this is actually kind of a miracle that's happened. You've met someone that makes you feel amazing, which we do know is the truth in some situations. Of course it is. And that's what I was hoping for. But my vision of what I was seeing wasn't real. It was all manipulation. It was the love bombing. It was as if I was being groomed to the point where ultimately we got married. And on the lead up to the wedding, it was still amazing. There was the odd thing, shall we say, when people always say to you, did you not see it coming? No, I honestly didn't until our wedding day. But there were a few signs on the run up to the wedding day, but they were small things in comparison to what we would assume abuse to be at the time.
Yeah.
And it was, why are you late back? Where have you been? And I'd say, I got stuck in traffic. Oh, okay then. It didn't escalate at that point. And it wasn't every day. It wasn't every week even. And it was actually on the wedding day that things changed. So obviously had an amazing wedding. I felt absolutely beautiful, as you should when we get married. Yeah. And we went back to a cottage that evening, and he poured a bowl of potpourri over my head and said, how dare you wear that wedding dress? And at the time, I just didn't know what to do. I was so shocked. I did not see that coming. And it was all because he said it was too revealing. One, it wasn't revealing, but had it have been revealing, that was my choice.
That was
right. We were allowed to. And I guess at that point, I think reality kind of kicked in. And I was like, I just married somebody that I don't know. And I didn't dare go and say to friends and family because they just seen me marry him at that point. And I think it was easier to kind of just go with it in the hope that it was a one-off. It was the strangest one-off it was ever going to be on your wedding day. But I really hoped it was going to be a one-off. And from that point, it just escalated. It just became so controlled. Everything over time became controlled. Who I spoke to, who I saw, what I wear, what I wore, you know, every single aspect. I ended up, I guess the way I would describe it is I was existing. I wasn't living anymore. I was just existing. And I had no, I guess, hope for the future. Does that sound too dramatic? But at
No,
that point,
not at 100%
I'd
get
hit, you know,
that.
and you know me, I'm brutally honest with my emotions. And I think I'd hit that internal brick wall where I just, as I say, was existing. The only thing that was keeping me going was my two older children from a previous relationship. So they were my motivation. When you're going into those dark places and thinking, how do I get out of this? What do I do? They were the motivation that kept me going, and my job. So my job for me, I'd always worked full time, apart from having the brief period off when I had my two older children. Work was my thing as well. I have, you know, I love my career. I'd love what I was doing. So I'd always worked. So that was the only other consistent thing in my life at the time. And I think, again, looking back, that was the one thing that helped save me, because when I was at work, I had, even though he would still harass me at work, I still had a respite, because obviously he wasn't at my work unless he turned up, which he did more and more so as time went on. But for me, I hit that brick wall, and it was an amalgamation of a number of situations where I just hit that wall, stood up at work one day, and I went, I am done. I can't do this anymore. And my boss, I remember my boss looking at me and going, what do you mean? And I'm sure at that point she thought I was going to leave, because I was like, right, I'm done. You know, she probably thought I was going to get my bag and off I was going to go.
Oh,
And she just said to me, right, let's have a chat. So I went into a meeting room, and all my emotions came flooding out at that point. They had no education on domestic abuse, neither did I at that point. So we kind of fumbled our way through the scenario and the situation. They covered for me the next day when I went to the police station. Back in 2015, as you will know, coercive control was only just coming in to be able to prosecute. So at that point, I didn't have any physical bruising on me. Went to the police, explained the situation. They then arrested him, but then they bailed him on the day after.
yeah.
I was continuing to live my life as best I could. I was still going to work every day because that was my routine. That's what I needed.
Yeah.
I'm a routine person. I'm a process person. So
Nothing wrong with that.
you know, I was like, I can't change this right now either. So I
No.
just kept going in that, I guess, head forward space, just keep moving.
Yeah.
And it was a few days after I'd gone to court during my lunch hour with my office manager to put a non-molestation order through. So again,
Yeah.
for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a protection order that was due to be served on him that evening. But I'd gone back to work in the afternoon, and we worked in an absolutely gorgeous building. It was a converted barn, so very, very lucky. But
Yeah.
as you can imagine, it wasn't one of these, you know, large companies with security. Anyone could walk in, anyone could walk around. And that evening, it was November, so very dark, cold outside. We walked across the car park, and we got into our cars that were parked next to each other, me and the office manager. And my car was slightly newer than hers, so it demisted usually very, very quickly. You know, and I just honk my horn or give her a wave, as you do
Yeah.
when you sort of drive off in the evening. And she drove off before me that evening, and I was left sitting in my car. And I remember thinking, well, this is a bit strange, because it wasn't just misted up, it was like condensation. And I thought, okay, this is really strange,
Like
really
body
strange.
heat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
was like, this doesn't make sense. But my brain wasn't functioning properly at that point, because, of course, it
Yeah.
wasn't a normal scenario. But then I had that horrible, horrible feeling that came over me, and I thought, he's sitting behind me, a bit like a horror film. So I remember
Yeah.
turning behind to look, and he wasn't there. And I thought, okay, just take a minute. You've been to court. I was absolutely shattered. My emotions were all over the place. So the car was running. I was about to reverse, and then I smelled aftershave. And I cannot describe the smell of that aftershave, because it was so intense. It was just, it was like a really strange moment. And I remember thinking something, that fear went from, you know, from your toes right to the top of your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, okay. So then I started fumbling around my hands, and I'm in the back of the footwell, and I found my picnic blanket. That picnic blanket had been in the boot of my car. So this bit is a real blur. I opened the
Yeah.
door, walked round to the boot and lifted the boot up. And in the boot of my car was my then husband, with knives, cable ties, and masking tape. Thankfully, I managed to find my voice, and I had flat shoes on, which was a bonus. But I managed to run, and one of my colleagues was still in the building. So she came out. He did kind of capture me, but I went down and there was a bit of a fumble kind of thing, protected my head and my chest.
Yeah.
Two gentlemen came from around the corner from, luckily, another business, because it was 5:30. And at which point he realised that he was outnumbered. My car was still running, so he then got into my vehicle and fled. But what he'd done was spent 3 days plotting what would have been my kidnap and my murder. He had gone to my home and angle grinded through the door to steal the spare car key. He'd driven 45, 50 minutes to where I worked and left his car around the corner. He got into the boot of my car and loosened the seats. And if I'd have driven off in that car, it's highly likely I would not be here today sharing my story with you. The judge in the courtroom said it had fatal consequences. There was no doubt that what was or would have happened. So for me, it is my reality. It was my reality, but I've chosen to make it as much of a positive, if that's the right way of putting it, as I can, to be able to help others, because it just goes to show how far someone will actually go to control somebody. And I never, ever thought that this would happen to me. I never realized that when I left that relationship that my life potentially was going to end. And obviously now you and I both work in this space with education. I've learned so much. And unfortunately, the shocking stats of how many people it happens to as well.
Yeah, it is. And I have to say, for anybody listening, they'll just be kind of number one in awe of you, because you are incredible. Many people would say, actually, this is what's happened to me. I can't talk about it. I have to just try and find a way of moving forward. Because I always say, I don't think anyone truly kind of moves on, because it will stay with you.
No,
Any form of
no.
But you definitely move forward, don't you? Try every day to do something to move in that positive forward direction.
I think you 100%, hit the nail on the head there with that. I'm really triggered at times now. Of course, my life is now spent training on this subject and training businesses, but I still have re-trigger moments. If I smell that aftershave, that's it. I go into freeze mode. There are times, but I've also learned what triggers me as well, and also learned to be more in touch, without sounding too cheesy, in touch with my emotions and understanding where I am at as well. Because if you are having a bit of a rough time just in life, everyone has ups and downs, whatever you're going through. I know that I need to be kinder to myself and allow myself time. And when I do my sessions as well, I have to kind of debrief to myself. And I have a very nice husband now, thankfully.
Yes, and I love that. I love the fact that, and I always say this about, obviously what you've experienced is unbelievable, and unbelievably horrific. And thank God you're okay. And in that sense that, he didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get to do what he wanted. And because of what he's done, he's actually given you a platform to help people that would never have known.
100%.
And and so he hasn't succeeded in what he was attempting to do. He's actually completely and utterly, beyond words, messed his whole life up, and actually given you a much better life, a happier life, a life with amazing purpose, which is incredible. And I think that's where you realize, as like you say, when you have to debrief yourself and you have to talk to yourself about these things, look at where you are now, and it's absolutely incredible what you're doing. And the fact that you can talk about it in such an honest way, in such a genuine way, and you do it with this almost, I mean, I feel your energy, and I just find it weird when people say, I feel your energy through the screen. I'll be like that, right? Okay. I'm northern, we don't do that.
I'll let you in on my secret. It's too much coffee and Haribo sweets. Don't tell everybody.
Nothing wrong with that, caffeine. Love it. I'm with you. And I think that is your energy, and that's what you give. And I think one of the amazing things, well, many amazing things about you, but one of the amazing things about you is that you do it and you don't make it a scary conversation. And I think that's what a lot of people find very difficult. And this is what I've tried to hopefully put forward with the podcast is, okay, this podcast's about all sorts of things out there. Well, why aren't we talking about this? Oh no, we don't. It's a taboo subject. It's only for certain people, and it's not for me. And actually, we can all learn something from it. And as you've just said, you would have never thought in a million years that you would be someone that was the victim of all those awful abuses, the coercive control from the minute you got married, from all those things, and the love bombing, and you learn so much. But nobody is immune to it. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize is there isn't some magic pill you take and go, that's never going to happen to me.
No, and I think it's changing that. When I'm doing my training, something I'm really passionate about is, yes, we know statistically that women are more likely to be victims of abuse, but I am fully inclusive of all gender identities, all backgrounds, all cultures, because in my opinion, nobody should be a victim of abuse, and we need to give everybody the opportunity to come forward and gain support and help, because that's my mission. Is ideally, as sure as everyone that works in this space would have a magic wand that would say, right, this is stopping. But everyone, as you and I know, have different barriers to coming forward. My barrier at the start was the ashamed, the belief, are people going to believe me? I've just married him and he's done this. There was, I guess, for me, the fear of being sort of seen as weak. Yes. Which at the time, because he used to say a lot of stuff to me, he used to say things like, why can't I break you? And he would try, he knew what he was doing, so he would say that. But I started to believe it. And then it was like, well, maybe I am weak. Maybe I'm not strong enough because this is happening to me. And it was all of those things that were the barriers personally for me. But we need to talk about it, because those barriers are only a barrier if you allow them to be a barrier, because there are people out there that will support you. There are so many support services that we signpost into, along with many others as well. There is so much availability for education as around, we need to be learning about this topic, because if we don't, it will continue. And I think for me, you completely touched on it, my purpose. Everyone always says to me, do you regret going through what you did? Do you regret meeting him? And it probably sounds really strange. In a way, of course I do, because I never wanted to go through it. But now where I am in my life, I don't regret it, because I do believe that I've been given an opportunity to make a difference. And every time I share my story, of course it's hard. Every time I deliver training or I speak to people and give them advice, of course it's hard. But that's my healing too, because every time when I go away and I think, do you know what? This has changed maybe one person's life, then that's all the motivation you need, 100%.
So it is so true. And I think because there is no expiration date, is there? What you are experiencing, like you say, for the rest of your life, this will have moments where I think I was sort of quite, especially around post-separation, they used to say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And for a lot of the time, especially when the perpetrator is still involved, whether there's children, family, court, whatever, that finish line moves further and further away, because they can't break you, as you just said, that your ex-partner would say, I can't break you. And that's what they want, that power and control. And I think, if people understand that, they're not weak, like you said, you're not a weak person, you're actually amazingly resilient and strong and incredible. And there's a million words out there I could use for you, because you're amazing. and I think if people understand that it's not a weakness at all, and to know that there are people out there saying, we're not here to judge. And I think that's a huge part, isn't it? I think for those of us working in this area, saying, we're not here to judge, we're not here to try and even second guess your situation, because we can't. What we're here to say is, you're not on your own. You are definitely not on your own.
And that's the key thing. You're not on your own. And I think, that's getting that message across. And obviously, I guess my journey, when I first started rebuilding my life, and I realized I need to do something in this space, it was like I had a calling. Again, it probably sounds really cheesy to all you listeners there. No. It was as if I had that moment where I was like, do you know what? I need to do something about this. But I had no experience in the domestic abuse space other than my lived experience. So my journey's probably been very different to some in the domestic abuse space, because I then set up my own recruitment company first, because that's what I knew. And I was like, I need to have my own business to be able to make a decision on where those profits go, what I do with my time. And it initially started off with me, I remember on the first week of setting up Cameo Recruitment, I ended up going to Cambridge Women's Aid, which is where I am, and dropping off biscuits and stuff for their Freedom Programme. And it was like, and they were like, what are you doing? This is like week one. But that purpose was with me from day one. And I do believe that because I set up my recruitment company to make this my mission, and it has worked. So you can follow that path that you want to create. And once you've been through abuse, I think you have a different different outlook, maybe not always, but for me personally, I had a different outlook, and I thought if I can survive that and I can feel fear that you cannot describe to somebody else, then what's the worst that's going to happen if my business didn't work, or I didn't get where I was supposed to be because I've tried. So it's definitely, yeah, I think the positive on it is that, yeah, I'm much more of a I take more of a risk now with
Yes,
things.
yes.
Like, oh, what's the worst that's going to happen? Thankfully, touch wood, it's paid off for me. But I was not that person before. I
No.
absolutely wasn't. I was very much, oh no, I'm not confident enough to do that. So I've actually got more confidence now
Yeah.
than the person that went through abuse.
Oh my God, that again, I just love it because everything you say, I just sit there going, and I feel like one of those nodding dogs in the back of the car because I'm just going, yes, yes, yes. And
You
that,
look beautiful as a nodding dog. It's fine. You carry on.
oh, you're too kind. But when you say about perspective, oh my, because one of the things that I used to do when I worked for my local domestic abuse charity was I did some group facilitation, and you would find people saying, and it's so true, you've just hit the nail on the head with it, is perspective. Your
Yes.
perspective changes so much when you have
Yeah.
been someone who has been impacted and experienced abuse on whether it's physical, whether it's both physical and
Yeah.
psychological, financial, whatever it is. It gets to a point where actually you say, well, what's the worst that can happen? I can try, I'll try working in this space. And I've said to people before, volunteer, do things that if you think, oh, well, I can't give back, I
100%.
can't, of course you can. You
Yeah.
absolutely, and you've got so much to offer, and you've got so much that knowledge that maybe things that some of us have never thought of before because we haven't been in your situation. And
Yeah.
and I think that perspective, you're right, is so true. I think
Yeah.
it's almost like a secret weapon that they've given you without even
Yeah.
you knowing it,
Yeah.
going,
No.
actually,
You do,
yeah,
but it takes you a while to find it. Obviously, as I said, I'm 10 years free of abuse this year. Um, but I think, in all honesty, I think probably the first 6 months, but I personally knew what was happening to me wasn't my fault. I knew this
yeah,
was his issue. Whereas I know that is something that people do struggle with,
yeah,
depending on what they've experienced and who they are as a person. I totally get that. But for me, I knew that it was his issue. So my healing process was probably different to others. We know that everyone has a different healing process, right, as well.
yeah,
But I think it was that kind of moving forward. And then I started off by doing things just like monthly, thinking, right, what am I going to achieve this month? And at first, it was probably the most stupid things to other people, but he stopped me listening to music that I wanted to listen to. And I was doing a talk the other day, and then I realized how old I am when I said this, right? Because everyone in the room was so young. And bearing in mind, it was only 10 years ago. One of the first things I did was I went to Tesco's and I brought the CDs that I wanted to listen to. Well, everyone's sitting there going, CDs? We listen to whatever app you listen
yeah.
to. I
But
was
it's
like, it
what
was 10
you
years ago.
want to do. That's the point.
Yeah,
It's what
yeah.
you want to do.
But
Yeah,
yeah, at the time, I went in and I brought those, and it was like step one. Step
yeah,
two, get back in contact with, people around you. Um, Go shopping and wear something that you want to wear. My hair color as well. As you can see, my hair's kind of like a blondie, brownie kind of color.
it's
When I was
beautiful.
with him, thank you. When I was with him, it was really, really dark. Now, that's fine, but that wasn't my choice. It
Yeah,
was all of a sudden dark. I don't like you being blonde. Blondes have too much fun if you go with that old cliche, whichever. But that's what he used to use against me.
yeah,
And then gradually I was able to, but to me, the first time I went to my hairdresser and went, this is what's happened, and I don't want this hair anymore. I want to be blonde. Honestly, I looked like a zebra for a bit because she said to me, you can't go straight back blonde, Sharon, because it will look really strange. You have to go through the process. I said, no, I'm adamant. I want highlights in it.
yeah.
But I looked really strange. It was like zebra-y. But I was like, but to me, I didn't
Yeah.
care. I was like, I've got blonde in my hair.
It's
So
my choice, and I want blonde.
I
I
was
love
like,
that.
blonde again. There's blonde streaks in like
Brilliant.
jet black hair. But it was something that I needed to do. And it was
Yeah,
just figuring out. And that's what when I'm speaking, obviously, as you know, I'm not a frontline support service at all. I have lived experience, but in the space that I now work, of course, I get people that come to me and say,
yeah,
can I have a chat?
yeah,
Yes, of course you can. And I will signpost the way that I train businesses too. But even to be able to give them some of my tips of, "Yeah, this is what worked for me, try it. It might
yeah,
not work for you."
yeah.
That's a privilege to be in that position, to be able
Absolutely.
to think, that helped me. And if it helps you, then that makes my heart happy. So yeah, all of this is, I guess, it's still a journey, right? I don't know where I'm going on this journey.
I Well, I think in 10 years you've done incredibly,
Thank you.
amazingly well and done so much. And that's the thing, like you say, it's if you start off with the idea it might just help one person, but then it
Yeah, yeah,
snowballs and you've helped so many people and you'll continue to do it. And I think through, like you say, your lived experience, but also now with domestic abuse education, and what
yes.
you've set up there, I think that's what's so important as well, is you are educating people, you're educating organisations, and we do find, and I know I hear this a lot, so either through LinkedIn, if I get messages from people saying, I'm scared of telling my boss or my
Hmm.
line manager ever, because at the end of the day, I don't want them thinking badly of me. And you
Yeah.
sort of think, but it's that self-doubt, it's that lack of
Yes.
self-esteem, all the things where that perpetrator has stripped you of all your self-confidence, and
Yeah.
really being able to reach out and say, I'm struggling, I'm not perfect, I
Yeah.
can't hold down a job, children, dealing with the courts and everything else, and maybe child maintenance and police and children's services and all these different plates you're spinning. And if for you and for a lot of people, I think your work and your job is something that actually, and at the time, you didn't want to lose that. And a lot of
No.
people will be at work sitting there going, I'm going to work through my lunch hour because actually I don't want to leave the office, or I'm going to
Yeah.
work late so I don't have to go home, or I'm going to go in early and do a really, and it's those kind of things that organisations should be more aware of and say, we're not saying that that person is experiencing abuse. What we're saying is, if you're more aware, you can just ask the question, say, I just want to check, is everything all right? And how are you?
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing with when you say domestic abuse, it's a really scary topic. It really is. We know that whether you're a victim, whether you're a survivor, whether you're someone that doesn't know anything about it, it is a scary topic because we are ultimately talking about life and death situations. So
Yeah.
people are going to turn around and go, "Oh no, that's not for me." There's also the fear in a workplace of, "Well, what do we do? What do we do? We don't want this responsibility." That's the barrier that I take down for the organization. I'm like, it is not your responsibility to directly save somebody. You're not a frontline support service.
Yeah.
However, through that education and understanding around what is abuse, what does it look like, who does it impact, how do we spot those signs, whether it be virtual, in person, there are signs that we can see. How do we start a conversation? And then if it turns out this person is experiencing abuse, it might be mental health, it might be something else, we know that.
Yeah.
But if it is domestic abuse, then how do we support that person? We refer them to the frontline support services that can do the risk assessments, that can keep
Yeah.
them as safe as possible, whilst following internal processes. We at Domestic Abuse Education have template policies. We have a personal safety plan, template one for businesses. So it's there. It's just, I think people don't realise, and then they're overwhelmed by the facts that they
Yes.
may have to have that conversation. But actually, you can save someone's life by having that conversation and
Yeah.
allowing them to reach out to a support service while they're at work, safe from their perpetrator, unless, of course, the perpetrator is working with them. Then we need to
Yeah.
be extra vigilant and work
Yeah.
out a way of getting them support. But by doing that, I have seen so many businesses that have had education and training that have been doing this with their employees. And I get told when it happens, people will message me and go, "We've helped somebody." And I'm like, "Oh, that's
That's
it."
it. Yeah.
And it's just that empowerment. So I think for me, when I'm educating and training, it would be easy to go down the, "Oh, it's happened to me and this is what's happened." No, I'm a survivor. I got here for surviving what I went through. And actually, yes, my story can be hard to listen to. And I know that from the feedback we get. But by the end of the session, they're empowered. Every
Yes.
single person is empowered to go away and go, "Sharon, we're going to do something about this." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Brilliant, go for it. Come on, let's change lives.
Yeah.
Let's save lives
Yeah.
together." And it's that. So I think I am privileged. I know I'm privileged to be able to do what I do now. Um, I genuinely love what I do. Whether you can love domestic abuse, no. But can you love
Yeah.
making a difference? Absolutely, you can. And that's where, um, I'm on that journey. But it takes the belief and support from people like yourself, giving me the opportunity to speak here today. The collaborations that I've got with the organisations that I'm ambassador for, so the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse,
Yeah.
Domestic Abuse Alliance, and then just networking and building those connections. And it all comes from usually an ally in each organisation that I work with that reaches out and says,
Yes.
"Sharon, what do you do? Can you tell me more?" And then they take it internally to their board or their
Yeah.
HR team and say, have you thought about this? So I can't do this on my own. I 100% can't. It is definitely the belief and the support from those that go, yep, we need this in our workplace.
And that's so, that, you know what, that is very, very true. And I've come across
Yeah,
that myself. And I think that's what's amazing is, we need those allies in those
of course you
spaces to
do.
say, actually, this isn't going to be something that's going to be a very scary subject. You can see beforehand what you're going to talk about. You can go through it all and decide what you want to hear and all of that kind of stuff and bespoke it, whatever it takes.
Yeah,
But I think
100%.
it's so important that those people are out there within those organizations who are championing people like yourself to say, yeah, we need to hear these stories. We need to be able to know, what do we do? No one's asking, like you just said before, no one's asking organizations to be the specialist, because they're not.
No, no,
It's saying, actually, we've got resources here for you, and we can signpost you to the people who are
yeah,
in that position and can help. And I think for me, that's why, again, with the podcast, and for those who don't, because I think something we come across quite a bit, isn't it? Is it's timing is everything. So for
oh
some
yeah,
people, they may
yeah,
go and seek support. And one thing I always try and say as well is, if you've sought support and it hasn't worked for you, it doesn't mean to say that no support will work. It just means maybe that wasn't right for you. And
oh,
actually,
100%.
keep trying, go back when you're ready, try again, try something different. And I think that's why with the podcast I love this so much, because it's done in a way that is informal. Like this, we're talking and we're
Yeah,
laughing, and you're thinking,
yeah,
they talk to this about what they talk about domestic abuse. What? No,
yeah. They're like, why are they laughing? Why are they smiling still?
why are they laughing and saying it? Actually, it's amazing.
Yeah,
There's purpose. And
yeah,
that's the point is, we need it to be a conversation that people aren't afraid of. And I think if there's more kind of choices of resources out there for people who,
absolutely.
yeah, and they may want to listen to something like this and listen to what you're saying, but maybe do it at lunch at work where they're not at
Yeah,
home and somebody's listening to it, and there's things going on, or with a friend out for coffee on their device if they need to, whatever it is. And that's where, I think we're developing a lot, in the sense of we're thinking outside the box, going, okay, we know certain people may not. And again, you go back to before what you were saying about everybody and anybody can be a victim and survivor.
yeah,
And I think when we come to like those cultural considerations, we need to think some people won't be able to seek support. So maybe these are ways of family and friends trying to find ways of helping and
yeah,
discovering what you do, and say, okay, maybe I need to educate myself a bit more. And so I did an episode a while ago with a lady called Sari Taylor, and she's a psychotherapist, and she talked about the experience she had with a friend. And she was saying if she could go back and do it differently, she would take kind of like the ego out of it, because she knew it
yeah,
was, that relationship was wrong and it wasn't going to
yeah,
work and they were a perpetrator. But actually, she said, now what I would do is I would just listen. I would say, I just sense that things are a bit difficult right now. If you want to talk, I'm here. And that difference between saying, I'm not putting pressure on you, and if organizations again do that, it's not the pressure. We're not trying to get
no,
results, or it's just,
no.
if you need someone
I'm
to
there.
talk to.
I'm
Yeah.
there if you need me, and when we are doing the full training and education, it's about the language you use. Where do you have those conversations? So
Yeah.
all of these barriers that potentially are there, we help to take them away. But ultimately, I think, everyone in this space that's doing their thing is incredible. I think what you're doing with the podcast is absolutely amazing, because it gives people, as you say, an opportunity to reach out on a different platform, to maybe get support, listen, hopefully feel empowered when they listen to speakers that have been through it, because that's my mission, is to empower as many people that are going through it now, that may be listening and thinking, but it's scary. It is terrifying, because you don't know what your future is going to look like. We all know that, but when you say that, look at where you are now if you're in an abusive relationship, and there is support out there. And it's about, in my mind, kind of cuddling that person. I like to think of it as a big hug.
Oh,
Cuddle that person, and what support do they need? So you need to
look.
feel that cuddle with the support that people
Yeah.
that need. And if they're working, their employer is one of them that can support them. If they can reach out to friends that maybe they've been isolated, but can they reach out to them? Family,
Yeah.
and then finding who you are as well. Your self kind of discovery is important, but that cuddle comes together, and that keeps you safe, but you've got to go about it in the right way.
Yeah.
For me, statistically, when you leave a relationship is when you're most in danger, which I had no idea about. So obviously I ended the relationship, nobody said to me at that point, this is when you're most in
This is going to
danger.
get worse. Yeah.
I felt so empowered because I was like, right, I've done this, I've got rid of him. He's on bail, but he's not going to come after me. I'm putting a non-molestation order in. Right, start moving forward. As I said, I'm very processy. So there was my process. I was like, right, step one, step two.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realise what was going to happen. And I think, for me, that was what really worked, was kind of that process. But I think, we really need to stop and think for each individual, what does that look like? Who can help them? And if they're leaving a relationship, yes, you are taking that control away very quickly. So we need to make sure that for every person that's leaving an abusive relationship, they can be as safe as possible. I would like to say that we could keep everyone from becoming a homicide statistic, but unfortunately we can't do that right now. What we can do is keep them as safe as possible so that when they do leave that relationship, they're being supported by, I'm just going to use an example here, Refuge, Women's Aid, Mankind, Gallup, there's a few there, whichever one that is needed for them. With them, their workplace have a safety plan. Their family and friends understand a safety plan with them as well. Like, if I don't hear from you, what do I do? We need to do that. And by doing that, we'll save lives, but we're then giving people an opportunity to leave, but not on their own. They're leaving with the support of, those around them, which again, unless, of course, they've been isolated, we know that they may not have their family and friends. But if they are working, the one thing that they will have is their workplace. And that's why I'm so passionate as well, because I'm like, sometimes you are the only people, and that was my case. They were the only people that I had at that point.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think that's, like you say, it's for somebody to leave. And again, we come back to the stigma around, well, you've left now, surely things are going to improve. And like you say, it is the worst time, and actually things will get worse before they could ever possibly get better. And I think being realistic and being honest about it, I think if we try and sugarcoat it, I think we're so much better at being honest and saying, actually, it is going to get worse. So what are we going to do about it? What is it we're going to do to make sure that person, if they, like you say, have been isolated from family and friends and their work colleagues and their line manager, and that, that organisation is all they have, what can they do to help that person?
100%. I think that's the thing. You've got that. You help them on that journey, with all of the means that we're looking at. And I think you're 100% right. Post-separation abuse can go on for days, months, years. Afterwards, and that's something that people aren't aware of, but they also don't know what the tactics are when it comes to post-separation abuse, and knowing how to approach them and how to potentially, if they can, deal with them and limit them as much as possible. There is support services that will work with that as well, so giving them that confidence that this is going to happen, but this can potentially limit it as much as possible, and work with you as an individual. And then I think the other thing that we started speaking about as well is long after an event. So my perpetrator was released from prison in 2023, and that was horrendous. At the time I was doing this, I was educating, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm all good. Everyone's like, are you okay? On the outside. I had absolutely every single thing that you could imagine, and I don't talk about this openly, really. I feel really confident talking to you, as you know. When I'm doing my training, I do, because it's really important, because that was obviously 8 years after it happened, but I needed to work out what my life looked like then, and I needed adjustments, and I left work in daylight. But because I run my businesses, I didn't have to go to a manager and say, can I leave at 3:30 and I'm not sure how long for? What would they have said? Well, actually, no, Sharon, you work till 5:30. So and I share that. So all of the training and education and stuff that I'm learning on my journey, I will share as part of the education and training, because so important that businesses think it could be years down the line, it could be post-separation abuse, it could be, I don't know, anniversary. It could just be smelling aftershave. If I smell aftershave this afternoon, I would be triggered this afternoon, and I would have a wobble, and I would need to go home and just speak to myself as I do and get my head back in the right space. But I think acknowledging that as well is so important, because you shouldn't have to hide that part of your emotions. And the businesses that I've worked with have really, really embraced that and said, we understand now. So if someone is re-triggered, okay, we go through the same process. Do they need some counselling? Do they need to speak to a support service again? Do they just need a bit of an adjustment? They need to go for a cup of coffee and have a bit of cake. You know, what do they? But the good thing is they are willing to listen and work with that individual. And that's what I say. You know, I don't know where my journey's going. I don't know how many times I'm going to have triggering moments. I honestly don't. But I do know that I have control about how I'm living my life. And I put a quote out on LinkedIn, funnily enough, that said, life does define you, but you have the choice as to how it does, basically. And that's what I live by. That's my quote that I live by, because you can't change, unfortunately, we can't change a lot of things that happen in our life, but you can choose how you respond to them. And you might have gone down one path, but you can change that as well. You know, it's never too late to go, actually, do you know what? I'm not happy with this one either. You know, because when you leave an abusive relationship, you're all over the place. You think that this is what I want and this is the path I'm going. Oh no, hang on, I'm going this way, and then maybe I'm going back that way. It takes time, and I think being allowed to have that time to really work out what's important to you. And obviously, I'm not getting any younger. I'm getting older, which is a privilege.
You look fabulous. You do.
But it's the Haribo. It's the Haribo in the coffee. But I think I'm going to get a plug for Haribo on here. They're going to use me to promote Haribo next. So I think, you know, that's the truth. It's like you can make different paths. You can turn back. You can try things, and it is okay to do that as well. Because when you've been through abuse, you will have changed as a person. You definitely will have changed as a person, and figuring out who that person is afterwards is really, really important for you to then live your life moving forwards the best way possible. But it takes time. I think that's the thing. It does take time.
It does. It's so true. And it's that, you know, there isn't an expiration date. It isn't like people almost sort of compare it to an illness, like, well, you're all right now. Actually, it's, you know, it's not going to go away. It will, like you say, you know, you've got to a point where you were in a place where you were working, you know, in this amazing area, and then he's released. And what do you do then? So then you like almost, okay, I'm not going back to square one, but I've also got to take a step back now and think, okay, how is this going to affect the next stage, the next chapter of my life?
Absolutely. And that's a scary place to be as well, because I guess, you know, when you leave a relationship and your perpetrator is still around as such, it's a very different experience to what I had. My perpetrator went into prison, so I had the respite of all of that time to be able to figure out what I wanted and feel safe. But then I had the re-triggering later on down the line. However, someone that's got to deal with that day in, day out after leaving a relationship, I can understand why people go back statistically 7 times before they leave for good, because it is hard. But I guess for me, I really do think the difference with having support at that point, if you're having a wobble and you're thinking, I can't do this on my own, I need to go back, I need this, it was awful, but the stability's there. If you've got different people around you to support you, you will reach out to them for that conversation and be like, I'm having a wobble, right, okay, what do we need to do to stop you wobbling? Do you need to come round? Do you need a cup of tea? Do you need a glass of gin? What is it you need? Or a pint of beer, whatever is your thing, you know.
To step back for a minute, you
know, so it's that. And I think, you know, and that is a difference that is starting to be made in the domestic abuse space. I think people are starting to realise that it is that people working together to give support from all different areas for each individual that needs it. And the more we can do that, the less likely they are to go back, the less likely they are to be manipulated again into that situation, and also go into another abusive relationship, because we know when you leave, you're very vulnerable, you don't see that you're potentially vulnerable, and then someone else might prey on those vulnerabilities as well. So again, we're building up, and that's where I really enjoy empowering people that are in that space. And then you hear do you call them success stories? I don't really know. Happy stories, I think. When people, you know, that you've supported on the way, in whatever way that might be that you offer, that come back and go, do you know what, you made a difference, and this is what I'm doing, I'm living my best life, and you just think, yes, this is it, this is why.
And that's exactly it. And it is possible, you know, for anybody that is listening and thinking, oh, that's great, but that's not going to happen to me. Of course it can happen to you, because like you said, you know, you would never have in a million years thought that this would happen to you. And I think we are all as human beings, and I always come back to this when it's so important to have statistics out there, but at the end of the day, we're all still human beings. We all are
Absolutely,
still,
absolutely.
and how we process things, how we feel about things, how we react to things, we're all very different. But I think anyone is capable of saying, actually, no, and this is my life, this is my choice to make that change and make that decision. And I think, one thing I talk about sometimes, I did a talk for a law firm a while ago about communicating with an abusive ex-partner. And, like you just said before, when it comes to, you still have to have communication, whether it's children are involved, etc. Instead of thinking, well, that's it, I'm stuck with them for the next 10 years, 12 years, 18 years, actually there are ways of communicating where you don't have to put yourself in that situation where, stand back for a minute, don't give it oxygen, think about what you say. There's so many tools out there to help people. And I've done an episode with Richard Port, MBE, around the family court, and again, another area that people are very afraid of and scared, and it's a huge area. But these are all things that organizations can take away, can't they, and say, okay, we may not know a lot about this, but we can go and find out, and we can talk to domestic abuse education, and we can say, right,
and I think that is the thing. It's, I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy, because it's not. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not scary, because it is. But you can take steps with support to be able to make a difference in your life, because nobody deserves to live in a relationship that is abusive, whatever that abuse is, whether it's, as you said before, financial, physical, sexual, emotional, whichever, it's still abuse, and nobody deserves to live in that. So I think it's and but you've got to be in the right space as well. I think that's it. It's easy for someone to go, well, you've got this support and you've got this, now you off you go. No, of course not. We still need to give them opportunities to look at what their life might look like, what support is out there. And then if someone turns around and says, actually, I'm not ready, okay, but we're here when you need us. If and when you need us, we are here. So you're not controlling that situation. You're just giving them opportunities to see what life looks like on the other side. And then, the more you can do that, the more the barrier goes down, the more likely they are to then at some point say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready.
I don't need the help.
And you're like, right, okay, thank you, let's go. But again, it's all about that, isn't it? And about giving people the opportunity to figure out when they're ready and what works for them. Of course, if someone's in immediate danger, we have to step in and go, no. There's nothing we can do about that. We need to protect that individual or family members or whoever it is that we need to protect. But we can work with that person. And I think there's this misconception as well that when you speak to a support service, you've got to leave. That's the biggest thing I hear is, oh, I don't want to talk to I'm just going to pick one here, randomly, refuge. I don't want to speak to refuge because that means I've got to leave today and they're going to make me leave. No, they are not. They're going to have a conversation with you and they're going to
support you.
And then if you go home that night and just go, actually, no, I'm not ready, I need to think about it. That's fine. And that's that misconception, which I always thought before as well, was that once you spoke to a support service, that's it. You're on your journey to leave.
You go,
So I think that's really important that we get that message out there, that you can have conversations with any support service. They will offer advice. And then it's up to you if you want to take that advice or when you want to take that advice. So if someone is listening, I would say reach out to support services in a safe space when you're not with your perpetrator and it can't be traced as well. So if that is in your workplace, then use your work phone, ask to speak to your HR person or one of the managers, and I'm sure hopefully they would help you, or even borrow a friend's phone if you need to, if you have still got friends or family around. But the support services are fantastic and they're there to give guidance and advice.
Absolutely. And you've just made me think then, and I know we can talk all day, but I've just two other things I thought of. But one was when I did work around group facilitation, you would get people say, I don't want to leave. It may be that they're caring for that individual or whatever it is. And it's that, we can't make that assumption, but actually there are ways of helping somebody to stay safe if they choose, because again, people say, well, why would you choose to stay in that situation? Well, actually, I'll get, here's a list of about 20,000 reasons why somebody may not be able to leave. And so, we, like you say, it's giving people, it was interesting, a lady called Jennifer Parker, who lives in America. She was on the podcast. The episode hasn't come out yet, but she said something, and when you get chills, and it was her accent as well, because she's the most gorgeous person. She's everybody that I speak to, I'm so lucky and so fortunate. And her words were, we've got to meet people where they are. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's
So
it.
true.
Yeah,
So
it's
true.
just like we've got to meet people where they are, not where we think they should be, not where an
No.
organization thinks they're at. Well, they've left, so this, all the things we've said,
Yeah.
in this episode about we make judgments or we make
Yeah.
presumptions about things. We have to meet them where they are. And if that means that they end up returning to the perpetrator, as much as it's the most frustrating thing in the world, then support them through that. We can't abandon that support because we don't agree with their choices. And that's the thing, is it's a process. It's not something that has a finite timing or ending to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm 100%. And I love that. That's so true,
Brilliant.
isn't it?
And look, I told her she's got to get it on t-shirts. I've said every time I quote it,
I'll wear one.
I'm going to make sure I quote it and say it's her, because I'm not pinching it. It's not mine.
No. Yeah. But no, it does make sense. And I think that's the thing. Everyone's at a different part of their journey. And absolutely. You've got to work with the individual, giving them the support that they need when they need it, if they need it, not judging as well. And that's the easiest thing to say, isn't it? Like, oh, they've gone back, yes, they have for a reason. Why have they gone back? Maybe speak to them about why they went back. What was it? A financial reason? They were struggling, they couldn't afford it. Okay, so how do we, if you're ready to leave again in the future, help with that barrier that's caused you to go back? That's where you can add value, because you don't go back unless there's a reason you go back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
No one is really going to choose to go back to an abusive partner unless they feel they have no choice. So if we can find out, and that's what I encourage people to do, is have that conversation. Why have they gone back? What was it? Were they lonely?
Yeah, exactly.
I was speaking to someone the other day who's just, who's left their perpetrator, and they're really lonely.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I'm lonely. When are you lonely? Weekends. Okay, so what are we going to do about your weekends? Because in the week they're working. What are we going to do about your weekends? So what do you need to do? How can you fill that time?
Yeah.
To stop you thinking, because it's easy to think when you're on your own. What can we do to help you? Oh, brilliant. Okay, so we've worked out that was the reason why. So they've gone off to do some different things and try different things on the weekend. It's that. So you've got to work with that individual, and they may go back. They may still go back.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's about working, as you say, with them, and just supporting them through, or signposting them to support services.
Yeah.
Being someone that can listen. If you're happy to, you don't have to. It depends who you are. If you're comfortable. But it's really about each person having their own individual journey, and hopefully at some point in their life getting out of that abusive situation.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And as long as people like you are out there doing what you're doing,
I'm not stopping. This is my mission. So
it's all going in the right direction. And as much as sometimes I think we think, oh God, you want things to move quicker. Actually, like you just said about 2015, when we were talking earlier, you look at 2015, coercive control had only just become a criminal offence, and now we look at it and go, look where we are. If there are changes, and there are positive changes, but the more people know that there is that help and support, the more people hear your story, I think the more people will realise that they are not on their own, and they're certainly not being judged at all.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.
So are you.
Oh, listen, you're incredible. And I know I've put, I'm sure on my resources page, there's domestic abuse education links on there. So if anybody wants to go and have a look and see, what you do. But you're amazing.
Thank you.
Very lucky to have you on.
Oh, but and thank you for raising awareness and having me on, because as I say, I can't do it without people like you. So yes, lots of love to you, and the podcast is absolutely fantastic. So
you're too kind. You're amazing. Thank you so much.